Most of us strive to lead a plain, uncomplicated life. The last thing any ordinary person would wish for is for governments, significant powers, or even the US Navy to get involved in their personal lives. Sometimes, however, there is nothing one can do to prevent this from happening. Darko Bagava, the main character in this story, is living proof of this very thing. All he longed to do was to fish, sell what he caught, and put big politics or military affairs out of his mind. But his entire world would be turned upside down in just one day. Darko Bagava was a humble fisherman from the Elafidi Islands on the southern coast of Croatia. He had been fishing since he was a kid. His father was also a fisherman before him, and so was his grandfather. It was hard for him to imagine that at some point in his life, the world's greatest political and military powers would step into his life. Bagava couldn't imagine himself doing anything other than fishing. He led a fairly simple life, and he was happy with it. Every day he would get up and get his nets and boat ready. Afterward, he would venture among the waters surrounding the Elafidi Islands and come back with some fish to sell. Every time he woke up, he expected the day to be similar and almost the same as the day before. He had been doing the same thing for years. He never contemplated the possibility of anything unusual happening. All he had to do during the day was to wait for his nets to get loaded enough, collect some fish, and take the product with him. After that, he only had to deal with a few regular customers he had known for years. Some of them were restaurant owners, and some had shops. If anyone had told Bagava that one day he would also have to deal with the heads of the US Navy, he would have thought it was a joke, but life is often surprising. By the time the incident took place, Bagava wasn't in a good financial situation. The pandemic had stopped the steady flow of tourists and visitors in the Elafidi Islands. Consequently, restaurants had a reduced clientele and bought less often from Bagava. Now he couldn't just keep selling to his regulars. He had to get new customers, and he still had to keep selling as much fish as before. Had he sold any less, he wouldn't be able to make ends meet at the end of the month. So on the morning of the incident, he got in his boat with thoughts about numbers, customers, prices, and bills. For the whole day, he kept making calculations. As he waited for his net to get loaded, he kept trying to think of ways to get through another difficult month. While he was absorbed in his meditations, he felt everything around him shaking suddenly. He had to grab onto the sides of his boat to avoid falling into the water. Nothing like that had happened to him for a very long time, but he knew it could only mean one thing. It could only mean that something extremely big and heavy had been caught in his nets. This was an unusual occurrence. For the most part, the fish he caught were fairly small, and his net would get full and heavy gradually throughout the day. But this time, it was different. As he quickly tried to keep control of the situation and get a steady grip on his net to pull it out of the water, he nervously wondered what could have caused such a violent shake. Perhaps a big tuna fish? It wasn't the season, but you never know. Those were very valued, and he knew a few fishmongers and restaurant owners who would pay him very good money for it. But when he finally managed to lift the net, what he saw left him bewildered. It was a very large and heavy object that looked like nothing he had seen before. It seemed like a big orange box with some sort of sensor attached to it. Other than that, he was absolutely clueless about what it was or what its function could be. He also saw with dismay that his nets had been torn apart by the weight of the object. It would cost him a fortune to get them repaired. The day had been long, and he couldn't fish with those nets, so he went back home to think about what to do with that strange object. The first thing he did about it was to post an ad online and contact one of the local newspapers. He didn't know what to do with the object or who it belonged to, so he could only hope for its owner to try to get it back and pay for the damage it had caused to his nets. After a few days, someone got in contact with him, and it was someone he would have never expected to. On another day of fishing, someone contacted Bagava on his boat's radio. It was a man who claimed to speak on behalf of the US Navy. In a broken Croatian, the man claimed that the object he had found belonged to the Navy and demanded that Bagava give it back. Bagava didn't know if it was a joke. At this point, he didn't care. All he wanted was to get rid of the thing and get his nets repaired, which is why he gave a shocking response to whoever was speaking to him on the radio. "Look, pal," he said, "I don't care if this big orange box belongs to the US Navy or to Admiral Nelson. All I know is it has torn up my nets, and it's going to cost me $3,000 to fix them. So no one is getting this thing until I get the money to repair my nets." He then received a call on his cell phone. He picked it up without knowing what to expect. Again, it was the US Navy representative speaking broken Croatian. He repeated the same thing he had told Bagava over the radio, and the fisherman had to repeat his point once again. Then the US Navy man hung up. Would that be the end of it? Luckily for all involved, it wasn't. Eventually, the Croatian Coast Guard agreed to pay for the damages on the condition that the US Navy would recoup them. And Bagava dropped the mysterious object in front of a US Navy ship. However, it was never released to the public what that enigmatic orange box was. Bagava resumed his simple and comfortable life and decided not to worry about the matter any further, perhaps for his own good. But Bagava wouldn't be the only person to find a mysterious object in the ocean while minding his own business. Disclaimer: to protect the privacy of those depicted, some names, locations, and identifying characteristics have been changed and are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblances to actual events, places, or persons, living or dead, are entirely coincidental.